When you think about what we need, just basically as human beings, safe and habitable and decent and dignified shelter stands at the center of that, right?
And that's why housing is such a critical practice area for LSNYC. Every day, we help New Yorkers who are fighting to stay in their homes, who are fighting for basic necessities like heat and hot water.
Landlords try to evict tenants because there's an economic incentive to do so. When they evict tenants, they can usually re-rent the apartments at a higher rate, and they can sometimes take apartments out of rent regulation, which is the laws that protect the affordability for low-income housing in New York City.
In 2017, New York City passed the Right to Counsel bill, which guarantees legal representation to anyone facing eviction in housing court. This watershed moment was the result of years of collective activism.
Right to Counsel for LSNYC has really changed what we do in a lot of ways. First and foremost, we've been able to grow our staff so that we're now the largest provider of housing services in the country. Last year, LSNYC handled over 26,000 housing cases that benefited over 55,000 people.
I've been living in my building for over 20 years. There was a transfer of ownership, and the new owner, he wants to turn the building into a condo. Being in housing court for the first time is frightening. If the ruling comes down against me, am I homeless? Because you don't know what the man in the robe is going to say. And that is so scary. I contacted Brooklyn Legal Services to see what would be our next step. Okay, it's free, but there's got to be a catch. They don't really care because nothing in this world is free. And it ended up turning to be the total opposite. It ended up being the opposite. They cared. They care. The landlord, he said something to me and I said, speak to our attorney. It's like the look on his face is shock. You know, you have an attorney? When you have someone that knows the situation and knows the law, the system can work.
The Tenant Rights Coalition is a group of attorneys and advocates working throughout the city to preserve affordable housing. In particular, we bring affirmative litigation on behalf of tenants associations in New York City.
Inherent in the landlord-tenant relationship is a power dynamic in which the landlord wields a lot of power over any tenant. When tenants can come together in a group, they can take actions that get noticed and build leverage and allow them to create power that they can use to make changes in their buildings. Emerald Equity Group sought to deregulate 6 of its rent-stabilized buildings in the Bronx. The result would have been massive rent increases.
You literally went into full force mode to scramble to figure out what to do because this was in the middle of the pandemic when everybody was really worrying and wondering if they're going to make it to the next day.
We combed through the documents and were able to find some legal basis for preventing the deregulation. Over 500 people would have potentially been displaced had these buildings been deregulated.
And they actually won.
It was a great victory.
They could stay within the community where they raised their children and some of them their grandchildren.
Over the past several years, we have brought numerous cases against the New York City Housing Authority, which is one of the largest landlords in New York City.
The city doesn't want to issue violations against itself. So because of that, there's a lack of accountability for NYCHA, and it's one of the worst landlords in the city. Tenants may have technically a roof over their head, but they're not living in truly habitable housing.
It was during the winter of 2021. So the temperature outside was 40 degrees. The heat and water inside was 40 degrees. And it was unacceptable.
For 8 to 9 months, the tenants in the building didn't have any hot water. They were unable to take a shower because of lack of adequate water pressure, and their bathrooms were destroyed. Tenants communicated to me how they felt ashamed going to work because they had to skip showers.
My grandson would have to come from his house and heat up the water on the stove and carry it to my bathroom, which is way down the hall.
Our resident counsel went to court to sue NYCHA, and that's how we got in contact with legal services.
Legal services settled with NYCHA by restoring the hot water, the water pressure, and getting repairs in the bathrooms. We also secured 25% back rent for the 8 to 9 months that there was no hot water.
Thank you, legal services, because y'all been a godsend.
LSNYC has fought and won thousands of housing cases, but it's a fight, unfortunately, that never stops.
We need to do everything that we can day in and day out to make sure that the folks that give this city its character are able to stay and live and thrive in this city.